The Christian scripture known as Revelation, or the Revelation of St. John, describes an apocalyptic battle at a place called Armageddon. Revelation 16:16. In the earliest Greek text, the name of the place is pronounced Harmageddon, which is a Greek transliteration of the Hebrew Har Megiddo, meaning the mountain of Megiddo. But the term Armageddon has gone beyond just a place name and now represents an epic final battle, a world-ending conflict. Here are some visual representations of Armageddon. Although today the words Armageddon and apocalypse are used kind of interchangeably, they are completely different meanings. Armageddon is the location of apocalyptic battles. Now, it looks like a fun time, but that's not really what this game is about. Let me enlighten you. Megiddo was an important place in the ancient world, not only the governor's mount, but also a narrow passage on the most important trade route that linked Egypt with Mesopotamia and Asia Minor. Because of this strategic location, Megiddo was the site of several major battles fighting over the control of the road. Megiddo was inhabited continuously from about 5000 to 350 BC, and during that time came under control of every big-name kingdom in the area: the Assyrians, the Egyptians, the Canaanites, the Israelites, and others. One aspect of the ruins at Megiddo interested a young boy in Grosse Ile, Michigan. His name was Steve Baldwin. He was intrigued by the descriptions of the fortifications being a series of concentric circles. This image stuck with him, and he imagined the possibilities of a game being played on a board with concentric circles. Steve was a chess and checkers player, and he enjoyed all the classics while he was growing up back in the 60s. And years later, in the 1980s, he was relocated to Spokane, Washington. And there he began to think more about this idea of having a game played on these concentric circles. He took it upon himself as a personal project. In his own words, "I worked late nights in my home office, creating lots of illustrations of potential game boards, with many playing strategies put into play." He said that a key inspiration for him was the game Kensington that was designed by Forbes and Taylor back in 1970. If you'd like to learn more about Kensington, check out my video on the game and the game Skirid, which was invented by the same guys. Link in the show notes. Steve's game idea evolved over the ensuing years, play-tested with family, friends, and colleagues, and finally in 1984 he felt it was ready for prime time. And so he collected up components, contacted printers and game component suppliers and a vinyl company to make the boards, and hand-assembled the first 400 units of the game Megiddo in a conference room at his place of business. Now here's a photo of the very first edition of the game Megiddo. Now the game has always been compared to Pente, and you can kind of see why. First, of course, it's in a tube. Second to that, it's a matter of placing glass gems onto a board. You're attempting to make certain configurations, and there is a capturing method involved. But Mr. Baldwin says that at the time, he'd never even heard of Pente, let alone played it. So it was definitely an independent development. So in late 1984, the game was being sold at a Christmas bazaar in Spokane. And it happened that one of the attendees there at the bazaar was a fellow named Chris Hunt, who was in town on business from London, England. The game caught his eye, and he took a copy home with him. He showed it to some mathematicians at the University of Cambridge, and they analyzed the games because, mathematicians like doing that. And they were very intrigued by it. Then Stephen Baldwin got a call from London. It was Chris Hunt, and he invited Steve to come to London for the 1985 British Toy and Hobby Fair. He thought the game had commercial promise, and so he said, "Bring some with you, and we'll talk about production and European distribution possibilities." So total surprise to Steve. He hadn't even met Mr. Hunt at the show in Spokane. But he packed his grip and he gathered up a few copies of the game and jumped a flight over to London. And lo and behold, he won the best new game of the year at the British Toy and Hobby Show. So with this feather in his cap, he returned home to Spokane. So as you probably know, at toy fairs and game conventions and such, major publishers will have folks kind of shopping around at what's new and see what the big hits are. They're always on the lookout for the next big thing. Well, the next chapter begins with another life-changing phone call. Two prominent industry insiders were at that British Toy and Hobby Fair, and they were intrigued by the game themselves. Raleigh Tesh and Tom Brownlich had worked with Gary Gabrell on the Pente game, and so they had experience with games of that ilk. In the mid-1970s, Pente was a runaway hit and gained popularity around the world. Well, Mr. Tesh had a proposition for Steve to produce the game Megiddo. He had connections to make it happen. And it did happen. Megiddo found its way to the store shelves. It was at Kmart and Dayton Hudson and Macy's and Montgomery Ward and Sears and Walden Books and Toys R Us, all the giant retailers of the day. These retailers wanted to have a boxed set rather than the tube, and so they created the boxed version of the game for those retailers. The bookstores seemed to prefer the tube for some reason. And so Megiddo was what you might call a successful product by that point. Now, you've heard me rave about Sid Sackson before, one of the most prolific and respected game designers of the past century. He held what you might call a powerful position in the game design business. And Mr. Tesh sent Sid Sackson a copy of Megiddo. And next thing you know, Steve Baldwin gets invited to Sid Sackson's place in New York City for dinner. Now, Sid Sackson liked the game, and he wrote it up in an article for Games Magazine. And by November of 1985, Megiddo found its way into the Games 100. So all this whirlwind of popularity, the game of Megiddo sold over 175,000 copies in that first year of publication. And in 1986, the game won the Best New Game of the Year at the New York International Toy Fair and the Paris International Exposition. This game obviously had the right stuff. And so let me show you the right stuff. I'll show you how to play the game, and then we'll come back and talk a little more about it. The Megiddo board is a pleasing set of concentric rings, upon which is a pattern of circles, describing 36 points used for the game. The star in the center and the 6 large rays are decorative, although the points of the center star actually describe the innermost circle of the play area. 3 can play, but most agree that the 2-player game is the best. Each player gets a supply of glass gems of a given color. The rules say ample supply. My copy came with 36 each in blue, green, and red. The board begins empty, and the first player is chosen randomly. With 2 players, they alternate turns, and with 3 players, the turns go leftward around the table. The goal is to acquire 36 points in a series of games. The series is called a match. There are 2 ways to gain points. The first is to create a pattern of 6 gems in a row. Such a row is cleverly called a Megiddo. There are 3 ways to accomplish this objective: a radial Megiddo, a circular Megiddo, and the spiral Megiddo. The second way to win is to capture 6 of your opponent's gems. This win is called an Arbata. Arbata was another ancient city situated near Megiddo. Now here's how those game-winning conditions are accomplished. On your turn, place a single gem in a single point on the board, or move a single gem 1 space outward or inward from ring to ring, as shown here. Gems cannot be moved around one of the rings. Capturing is done by a custodial method, by flanking 2 and only 2 enemy gems by 2 of your own. This pattern can take several forms as well. The radial capture, the circular capture, and the spiral capture. Note that if you're playing with 3 players, the 2 flanked and captured gems can be a combination of the opposing colors. The captured gems are removed from the board and placed in the capturing player's area for later scoring. Then those spaces that were occupied by the captured gems are filled with the active player's gems. It's possible to perform more than one capture in one placement or move around the rings or radially. And it's possible that one capture can initiate another due to the change of gem colors. This is called a chain capture. Captures cannot involve gems on both halves of the board across the center. There are no suicide moves. That is, a gem can be moved into a space that forms a flanked pair without being captured. If a capture is discovered after a player's turn is over, the capture pattern is ignored and all the gems are left as is. The game ends with the formation of a Megiddo, or accomplishing the Armada by capturing 6 gems. Scoring is a cumulative total of points as follows. Each Megiddo is worth 6 points, and each captured gem is worth 1 point. If additional Megiddos are formed in one game, each is worth 12 points. If someone should reach a total score above 36 during a game, the game in progress continues to its Megiddo or Armada conclusion. Now, tournaments were organized in America and Europe, and it was also included in the Mind Sports Olympiad competitions, which was an annual competition of abstract games. There was a Megiddo World Championship held in 1986, with over 90 players involved in that tournament. Raleigh Tesh, who was a ranked chess player as well, won that first World Championship. And the tournament was covered by CNN. Now here's an amazing bit about that World Championship. The pieces that were used, the gems that were used, were gems. Diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. And those gems were delivered by an armed guard with a chained briefcase and all kinds of pomp and circumstance. These guys were big on publicity. They took over an ice rink in Portland, Oregon, created the pattern of the Megiddo board on the ice, and had human beings out there performing the part of the pieces as they played the game. The players on the ice actually held umbrellas of red and blue to differentiate the colors for the audience up in the stands. And orders continued to come in from retailers around the world. Everybody wanted to have Megiddo on the store shelves now. In addition to the tube and box versions, the market demanded more. A peg version was published by 2 different companies. And there was also a magnetic travel version with this cool little wallet. Now maybe you've heard that saying that one of the worst things that can happen to a business is success. Well, leave it be said that several factors came together that put Mr. Baldwin's business in a very precarious situation. And so rather than suffer through a crash and burn situation and lose everything, Steve had to say, I'm going to have to walk away from this and pull the plug on the Megiddo project. And although the game continued to be played and popular, it disappeared from the store shelves. In 2011, Steve brought back Megiddo in a commemorative edition. This is a copy of it here in the gold tube. There had been a small rule revision incorporated in that newer edition based on experience in tournament play. An app was developed for iPhone and Android. But then life happened again, and Mr. Baldwin had to back away from his dream once more. And that dream was he wanted to achieve some recognition of the game that he'd developed. He was quoted in an interview saying that I wanted to create a game that would enjoy lasting recognition, last for generations, be easy to learn, and have a depth of strategy. And he did that. Well, now Steven's hoping to resurrect the game one more time. I agree that the game definitely deserves to be reprinted, and as these developments happen, I'll be sure and let you know what progress is being made. And I definitely want to say thank you to Steve Baldwin for supplying me with a copy of the gold edition of the game here, and wish him all the luck in the world in resurrecting the game one more time. And I hope that you get to play it as well. It's a terrific game. Play it in the vintage edition or the more recent one, or watch for the future edition of Megiddo. But no matter what you play, remember, like I always say, be sure to play every day. Hey, just a little postscript for you. I forgot to mention the book. Raleigh Tesh and Tom Brownlick got together and wrote this book about strategies and tactics for the Megiddo game. It's filled with a lot of in-depth studies of how the board geometry works. It was subtitled Simple Secrets to One of Today's Most Challenging Strategy Games. I do not have the book. I couldn't find it online anywhere. Maybe it's time for a reprint.